Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. We are back from a 1-week vacation. Thanks for giving us that time. A lot of family fun along the way, but we are back in the saddle now for the final stretch of July. And when we get into August, we get back on the practice field. Penn State preseason camp now very, very close. We're on the doorstep of seeing this team in action yet again. Hear the pop of those pads, start to figure out what this depth chart is going to look like when the Nittany Lions take on Nevada in Beaver Stadium on August 30th. And with that in mind, it's a big week kind of setting things up here at Lions247.com. As I speak right now, Daniel Gallen and Mark Brennan are arriving in Las Vegas for Big Ten Media Days. Penn State is going to be one of the main attractions on Wednesday. It's a 3-day event right now out in Vegas for the first time. We're used to it being in Indianapolis. So we'll learn a lot more about that and what Daniel and Mark heard, saw, witnessed, and everything else between Penn State players and Penn State opponents. And, of course, James Franklin at the podium on multiple occasions. We'll get them on the show later in the week. We'll get a full recap from Las Vegas and hear about what went down and how it maybe educates us a little bit on what this Penn State squad could look like when it gets back on the field. But to really tee things up here, we're going to bring in an audience favorite, Landon Tengwall, former top 100 recruit, former starting Penn State offensive lineman, medically retired prior to the 2023 season. We've had him on a bunch of times here on the podcast as a recruit, as a player, and ultimately as a retired former Nittany Lion. And he has done a great job in the past 2 years of diving into this media world. He is now a Penn State graduate. We're going to talk about what he's got cooking for y'all in terms of his coverage for this upcoming college football season. But more importantly, we're going to get into his connections within the Penn State football facility, his knowledge of this roster, the staff, and overall what he thinks are the really key storylines for Penn State in the month ahead as they try to put themselves in the best position to have a really strong regular season and then go beyond that with another playoff appearance. So without further ado, let's bring in Landon Tengwall. And as I said, you are no stranger to the Lions 24/7 podcast, and you made me feel pretty old with a little bit of news you brought to me pre-recording. Happy birthday. Not today, but we're fresh off of it. 23 years old, Landon. I think when I first spoke with you, you were about 14, maybe 15. First time you were on this podcast, you were probably 16. So here we are, man. I'm excited for what's next for you. But as I always say, I appreciate the conversations over the years.
Absolutely, Tyler. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man. And you're right. We got to count. Someone's got to count how many times I've been on Lions 24/7. It's awesome, and I love it every single time I come on. So thanks again for having me on. I'm excited for this season. As you mentioned, officially graduated from Penn State this past December, day after SMU game. I highly recommend. I did not go to graduation. I told because it was like 3 or 4 days before Christmas. I had some family up here, my girlfriend's family. We decided to go to the Skeller, and my girlfriend's mom, she is a professor here of like 40 years. She brought the whole get up, and she had like a diploma, and we did a little celebration at the Skeller, or Doggies, trying to preserve the name there. But I highly recommend that if anybody watching, that's a great. It was empty. I had a great time and got to enjoy the Skeller instead of like sitting in a big stadium for like 3 hours. So it was really fun. Tyler, as far as what I got going on this year, post every single day. Check out my Twitter at Landon Tengwall. I'm going to be relentlessly posting on there, probably too much. If you get annoyed, you can hit the unfollow button if you want. And then on YouTube, Landon Tengwall's College Football Show. I'll be posting daily on there. I'm excited to do live call-in shows on Monday night. And then also, I am doing a weekly film breakdown on the For the Blog YouTube channel. If anybody watches, Coach Kadudi did it last year. They're doubling their amount of film breakdowns and bringing me on weekly. Pam Health's putting that on, and really excited about doing that this year. So ton of content for me. Finally graduated, finally fully into the media space here with Tyler and the crew. So I'm excited, man.
Some people take a gap year after they graduate to figure things out, maybe rest up. You're not doing that. You are full throttle. I love it. I appreciate the hustle. And you heard from Landon, a lot of opportunities to kind of check his content, video, otherwise, over these next several months as Penn State gets back on the field. And Landon, before we get in our conversation, I do need to pass along the results of our 11-man draft that we did a couple weeks ago, because I promised myself I would since I won it. We did a live draft on this show where we had to work off the Penn State roster. 44 players were selected. Myself, Tyler Calvaruso, Daniel Gallen, Mark Brennan. I got 45% of the vote. Brennan got 38% of the vote. Calvaruso got 14%. Poor Daniel Gallen down at 3%. I think he was a little underrated on his team overall, but 3% for him. So appreciate the win to everyone who voted. I just want to put it out there. I probably wouldn't have brought it back up if I had lost this, because I think Mark Brennan won the last couple of years. But voting is done. 11-man draft is officially done, and Tyler Donahue has the best team as voted on. We don't get to see them play, but sorry, Landon, I just wanted to get that out there, since we had about a 50-minute show before vacation picking these teams and encouraging people to vote.
That's all. Who was your star player? I got to ask. Who are you? Give me your top 2 or 3.
So it depends on what you consider to be a star. I would say the biggest kind of pivot pick for me in terms of shaping the draft, I took Dom DeLuca in round 4 to play quarterback, because he was a really strong quarterback in high school and to be a linebacker, 3-year team captain. And so you had Drew Allar come off the board early as a quarterback, and you kind of got to figure out where he's going to be on defense. I didn't feel like playing that game with Gronk or Jackson Smolik, and so I went with Dom DeLuca. We're going to grind it out. And so that backfield I had DeLuca at quarterback, Tony Rojas, and Katron Allen at running back. I had a real offensive line, and that was the tricky part, Landon. You can only pick 11 players, so you got to find guys who can be an acceptable offensive lineman and an acceptable defender. And so there was a lot of nuance. Maybe we'll get you involved down the road, because it is a fun exercise, and it kind of lets you flex your muscles a little bit on your knowledge of the roster and who's a baller.
That's really fun. Great call on Tony Rojas and Dom DeLuca. Tony Rojas, obviously Gatorade Player of the Year as a running back, and then Dom DeLuca won the state championship on a torn ACL halfway through and put up 3 touchdowns. So I'm with you, Tyler. I would have voted for that team. That's a hell of a roster right there.
I got the Landon seal of approval now. Now we can move on. I'm officially good to go on this year's draft. Landon, I challenged you when we talked about getting you back on. It's been a little while. I said 5 preseason storylines. We may go beyond that a little bit. We'll bounce these topics around. But last time you were on this show, it was within 48 hours of kickoff of the Orange Bowl. Penn State was on the doorstep of getting to the national championship game. We know what happened that night in South Florida, but we have about 6 months of roster activity and coaching moves to catch up on. So tell me, where do you want to start in terms of preseason storylines that have your attention?
Tyler, let's just go with the main one. Let's talk the wide receivers. What Penn State fan doesn't want to talk wide receivers right now? For me, I mean, it's a completely revamped room. I think you do have some young guys that there's definitely some excitement there for. But I mean, the biggest thing is, out of these 3 guys, I mean, who are we going to hit on? Because we've had some good ones. I mean, Mitchell Tinsley worked out great. We also, in the offseason, we think every single transfer wide receiver is going to pan out. And obviously, it was not that way. We had a bunch, Malik McClain, we had Dante Cephas, all that type of stuff. And we saw, struggles there. Now, I think the good news is with these 3 new guys, with Ross, Pena, and Hudson, is that there is going to be an emphasis to get them involved. I think there is an understanding between Coach Franklin and Kotelnicki that, hey, we cannot allow that to happen again, where we just truly neglected the wide receivers. And I think that Notre Dame game, everybody was asking, how did they have no receptions? But I feel like it was kind of a culmination to that point. And I went back and looked at the stats. Every year, the wide receivers were involved less and less and less. If you're starting in 21, when it was still Jahan Dotson and Tinsley were the guys, and Parker Washington, they had about 200 receptions, and they went down about 25 receptions each year to basically 102 receptions or 104 receptions total last year from the wide receiver room. And so I think that was hard for Drew Allar, because the wide receivers he has have a real lack of confidence in themselves because they're not really getting involved. And then how does Drew Allar have confidence in his wide receivers if they don't have confidence in themselves? And it kind of all plays off of each other. And look, I understand when we constantly just, we had Nick Singleton and Katron Allen since 21. The tight ends have been great. And then last year, Tyler Warren was one of the best players in all of college football. So I don't blame Kotelnicki for designing that offense around the running backs and the tight ends. But then when it was time to turn to the wide receivers, we really didn't have a lot. And we were duped week 1 that, West Virginia, and we were like, oh, we got Trey Wallace. This is our number 1 guy. Let's go. And obviously we know how that kind of, fizzled out. So for me, it's just kind of establishing that relationship. We have those 3 games against Nevada, FIU, Villanova. It's easy to say, obviously, let's get these guys involved. I am really excited for what Trevor Pena brings to the table. Obviously, being that slot wide receiver, that inside guy, you can be that gadget guy That's kind of what he was at Syracuse. Obviously, had a ton of receptions, but Fran Brown had him doing a ton of different end arounds, passes, all these different things. So I know Kotelnicki loves his gadgets. I think we could see him get involved there, but also be that safety blanket for Drew Allar, because obviously Tyler Warren is gone. 6th-year guy in Trevor Pena, veteran, knows how to do it. Like I said, is used to a ton of receptions. I don't think he will get as much as he got in a very pass-happy Syracuse offense with Kyle McCord, but I still think it could be really good for him this year. And then looking at the other two outside guys, I think Hudson, we've seen it as a little bit more of that sure-handed wide receiver that can go up and make a play. He had 0 drops last year, which I think is really good for Drew Allar. And to be kind of a little bit, he's not huge, but a little bit of that bigger body. And I think Ross is a little bit more of a stretch the field type, have a little bit more speed. Saw him, he was returning some punts and whatnot last year. So, you got a good combination with the three, but that's just the question. Can they gel? Can Penn State get enough out of their wide receivers? And I think that's the biggest thing, Tyler, is we don't need to fully rely on Drew Allar and the wide receivers to take us to the promised land. We have the best run game in college football. I think we have a top 3 offensive line and top 3, I would even say best running back duo in all of college football. We're going to be able to rely on that ground and pound, but there's going to be moments against Oregon, against Ohio State, hopefully Big Ten championship and playoffs, where we're going to have to be able to pass the ball a little bit. And, I think that is, can these wide receivers show up? Can they gel? Really is just kind of the overall biggest question.
You and I will talk about that run game. We'll talk about the quarterback as well in just a bit, but I want to circle back to those 3 receivers. It sounds like you're highest on Trevor Pena, maybe making the biggest impact from game 1 to game 16, 17, wherever Penn State wants to go. Am I right in that read? And ultimately, how do you kind of marry that with the fact that Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross have been around since January, whereas Pena spent spring ball up at Syracuse, New York?
Yeah, I think from a standpoint of just kind of how it fits, I do like him the most. Like I said, especially at the slot wide receiver position, last year kind of lacked there because someone we haven't talked about at all, who still I feel like hasn't been mentioned at all this offseason, Caden Saunders, still around. And so it was kind of the spring game. Caden Saunders had a pretty good game. It looked like he was poised for a pretty decent year around that slot position. And then obviously was injured, showed up in West Virginia, and then kind of just decided to shut it down. So I just think we've been needing that slot wide receiver that Drew can trust, that he can just, boom, get it out quick. And I think he'll kind of take over a lot of those Tyler Warren targets. And that's where Tyler Warren would line up a lot in the slot. And we ran a lot of rub routes, a lot of design plays to Tyler Warren. So that's just kind of I think, and we can even talk about that in a little bit, I think Luke Reynolds is going to be great. Obviously not Tyler Warren great, but I think he can be really, really good in this offense. But mainly, I just think Drew's going to be looking for that number 1 guy. And I don't think we're going to completely change our identity where Penn State's going to be slinging it down the field. And I think we're going to have a lot of Trevor Pena in these intermediate routes where it's just scheme him open a little bit. He's quick, he's fast, he's a little bit smaller. And like I said, a 6th-year guy that's savvy, that has been in a pass-happy offense. So he's going to have to, tamper down those expectations of how much he got the ball last year. But I think he knows what kind of offense he was coming into. And, I just the most proven one, I would say, Tyler. I think, obviously, Ross coming from the MAC, really talented. I think a lot of expectations are really high for him. He's the fastest one, but can he do it at this level? A little bit of PTSD there from Dante Cephas, perhaps. And then with Hudson, good player, captain at USC. I think he could be one of those glue guys of the team, but still has to show, I feel like, a little bit more on his tape to be that guy, to be the number 1 guy. And so really I'm basing that off Trevor Pena has already done that. He's lived that life. So I feel like the experience there, I think it's just going to gel a little bit more. But as you mentioned, he did miss spring ball. He wasn't here. So there is that catch-up period. Will it take a little bit of time? Are we going to try to maybe really get him involved earlier on? So I think those are things to look out for. But I think no matter what, I appreciate the fact that Andy Kotelnicki and James Franklin and company identified, yes, this is a real problem, completely revamped it, brought in 3 guys. And, I think even if 2 out of the 3 pan out, we're in a really good situation in 2025.
You mentioned some PTSD with past transfer pickups. Julian Fleming, a lot to love about him as a person off the field. What he did late in the USC game was so important for Penn State. But overall, you look at the box score for Penn State, the stat sheet at the end of the year, didn't make that huge impact, a major impact that some people had hoped. You mentioned Dante Cephas and Malik McLean. They were one and done, disappointing results in terms of production. I go back to that 2022 season when you were a starting guard for Penn State and Mitch Tinsley was a starting wide receiver. He had one season with Penn State after making his move up to the Power Conference via transfer. You saw him go through that process. I believe he showed up in January, so he had more of he had the runway that Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson are working with now instead of Trevor Pena. Why was he able to have that consistent success? Because he was arguably, considering Parker Washington got injured, he was arguably the most consistent receiver from game one through the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch, he was just about his business. Honestly, came in and he just loved football. Always saw him on the jugs machine. I think the other piece of that too was he was paired up with Parker Washington, and I think that took a little bit off of him. They were also like best friends. It was cool to see. But yeah, I mean, a piece of that too is obviously Sean Clifford. That was Sean Clifford's 6th year, and we were slinging it. I'd say a little bit more than I would expect even this past year or this coming year, because the run game, it was still kind of starting to work that way up. But if people remember, I mean, 2020 and 2021 run game was rough. I mean, it was.
I remember all the post game podcasts. Trust me.
Yeah, it was not good. So, I mean, I would say, like I said, I give you the stat. We just passed it a lot more, so it probably felt better and just got our wide receivers more included. But yeah, I mean, it really is all about that gel with the quarterback. Is like, will Drew Allar want to give you that chance? Like that's what made, I think, so many people so happy coming off West Virginia is we saw him throw a couple jump balls to Trey Wallace. He did it twice. One was a PI down the sideline and just kind of threw it up, and Trey got lucky and drew a PI. And then the one was the touchdown right before half in the corner of the end zone against West Virginia. And it was kind of like, okay, this is awesome. We feel like we're at a place where we actually have some guys that we can trust to go make the play. Because it's one thing, obviously, to be open and you scheme, Kotelnicki schemes them open and you're able to get them the ball. That's great. But the trust in Drew Allar of, hey, this guy is on a go route. I'm going to put a little bit of a back shoulder fade on it. And we have that connection that I know he knows what's coming. I think that's important. So like you said, I think that is where maybe it lacks a little bit with Trevor Pena, and it might be better with Ross and Hudson. But I got to say, I got to give us the old fashioned, you don't really know until you know, I guess. And for me, what's almost hard is, and I've said this a couple other times, I have more PTSD, Tyler. I keep talking about PTSD of getting duped of like the first 3 games, and say Ross is out here with like 250 receiving yards and a couple touchdowns. And it's like, oh yeah. And then we kind of revert back, or maybe they don't show up against Oregon and Ohio State. So for me, the passing game of really seeing where they're at, it's against Oregon for me, Tyler. And that's going to be the first game where I think we get some good vibes from the first 3 games of where we are at. But that game is going to cement for me, hey, I mean, I think no matter what, we're in a national championship run, but is this team really for real where, let's just say they want to put, the defense wants to put 7 or 8 in the box. Drew Allar and Trevor Pena and Kyron Hudson and Ross, we're fine. They're going to be able to sling it, and we're going to be in a really good position, and we have trust that they can succeed one-on-one and win there.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think it's an answer we'll have on September 1st, maybe on October 1st, but really November 1st is when people want to see these guys show up, right? Yep. Against an Ohio State squad. I mean, Caden Saunders got that touchdown in garbage time late in Columbus a couple years ago. I can't think of another play wide receivers have made against Ohio State in the last couple of years, and you were really one play away from tying or winning those games. So such an important piece of the process. And of course, the trigger man is going to be at the forefront of this conversation just as much as the wide receivers. Drew Allar, 4th-year player now with Penn State, 3rd-year starter, a guy that's within striking distance of several records for Penn State passing. And obviously people want to see him go out and win the big games, beat the Oregons, beat the Ohio States, beat whoever's out there mid-January to late January. And let's get into that now. When you had a chance to dive into that Notre Dame tape and really kind of do the autopsy on what last season was for the passing attack, how much of the kind of burden/blame lands on Drew Allar for no completions to a wide receiver in the Orange Bowl? And, Ohio State, the fact that they're not able to move the ball downfield with any kind of authority. I know a lot of people have piled it on the receivers, but there's certainly a part of our board that wonders if Drew Allar can be the guy that rises those ships around him. What do you make of where he is going between year 3 and year 4? What were some of the shortcomings he maybe picked up last season, and how can they be addressed?
Yes, I mean, coming into this year, Drew Allar has all the intangibles to be the most. I mean, he is the most talented quarterback in college football. That's how I see it. If not, one, two, or three, right there. I think the biggest hurdle for him is really it just feels like from the mental side, and I think a piece of that is being in year one of Andy Kotelnicki. A piece of that, like I talked about earlier, is not having confidence in his wide receivers, which I completely understand. And you just kind of saw it, even in, had a really good game against Boise State, but wasn't really talked about too much. SMU was pretty shaky. He had some throws where his just mechanics just looked really off. And then obviously the Notre Dame game, multiple throws where it wasn't there. And it just looked like he did not have the confidence that he needed to go in and win that type of game. So, I mean, for me this year, once again, I feel like it's hard to have any questions answered before week 5 or week 10. And really, I'm feeling week 10. I think we can understand a little bit and see some, but I mean, Drew Allar's going to be great against all of those, Iowas and Indianas, and obviously the first 3 games. So I don't really have questions there against kind of those mediocre teams. Can Drew Allar get to that point where he was playing against Oregon, where, I mean, he did have 2 interceptions, but what I saw was a fearless quarterback, someone that was not afraid to zing it in there. Everybody's seen the play where he had, someone hanging on him, zipped it in there on 4th and goal, right to Trey Wallace, touchdown. Can he play with that kind of reckless abandon, but still be safe, still be the Drew Allar that has a great touchdown to interception ratio, but take a little bit more risk? And honestly, if Drew Allar tacks on 4 to 5 interceptions more than he has the past couple of years, but he's taking good risk, I don't have a problem with that, Tyler. I think at times he's almost played too conservative. And just talking, I mean, the biggest thing I think where we'll see is, like I said, those big games. And Drew Allar, really up to this point, I'd say he's played in about 7 big games. I classify that as Ohio State, Michigan, Big Ten championship, or playoffs. So he's played in 7 of those. And his averages of those games is about 150 yards, 14 completions, about 1 touchdown, and a little over half of an interception. That's, not superstar numbers. And, it's just every game it feels like where we need the passing game to step up and the run game. And that's kind of what I was talking about, where the run game does get shut down. And that happened in Columbus against Michigan at home in these past couple of years from 23 and on. It just feels like, hey, we have nothing really to separate. And now I'll tell you, looking at the Ohio State tape from last year at home, I thought Drew Allar actually played a decent game, but there was nobody open. I mean, they had Caleb Downs to neutralize Tyler Warren one-on-one, and that was rough for Penn State, because normally if you found a way to neutralize Tyler Warren, which most people did not, it took at least 2 guys. And Ohio State was able to kind of do that just with Caleb Downs. And so,
Landon, you talk about confidence. I'm thinking about that ball. It's set in the direction of Harrison Wallace in the end zone, and what that could have maybe done for momentum inside Beaver Stadium. Instead, it goes the other way with an interception. And it felt like that was that.
Yeah, and it was a good ball. Like, it wasn't, that was just unbelievably unlucky. But he gave Trey Wallace a good ball. So, like you said, if I'm Drew Allar, I'm all season fighting with, and you're never going to throw your wide receivers under the bus. You don't ever want to do that. But I'm fighting with the fact that I don't think that guy can go out there and make a play for me. And that's really hard when all you have is Tyler Warren. He knew that he had that. And so there's reasons why there was so many lob it up to Tyler Warren, and it worked out. So that's why, no one on this offense, as far as receivers or tight ends, is going to be as good as Tyler Warren. But can we still get something that will actually help Drew Allar out? Can we get that 50-50 ball where everybody's covered? Maybe, yeah. Oh, but I got whatever, Ross. I got Hudson one-on-one. I trust that. Let me put it up top for him and go make a play. So that's the biggest thing for me, I think, is Drew Allar's confidence in himself, his confidence in the wide receivers, confidence coming in as a year 2 quarterback in an offense, I think, is huge. Really thankful that Kotelnicki decided to come back for what is probably 1 more year. I mean, he was very close to taking that West Virginia job there. So I just lot of that question of, can he shoulder all of this and be the dude this year? I mean, and we can talk about it more in a second. I know we will, but the good news is he doesn't necessarily fully have to be, because he's got the best part of the offense is that O-line and the running backs. But I that's my biggest question is just that confidence in every piece of that passing game. And I think that's where we can start to build that in week 1. We can't answer all the questions in week 1 or 2 or 3, But I think a lot of that confidence can really begin to be really built up at the start of the season and even in fall camp coming up here in about a week, Tyler.
Unlike anyone else who's currently covering this team, Landon, you shared a huddle, you shared meetings, you shared game experiences with Drew Allar. Now, your last year playing, he was a freshman. He was the primary backup. He got involved sometimes. The next year, when you had to step away during preseason camp, he is the starter. So tell me, based on what you knew about him then, and I know you two are staying in contact. He's not a stranger to you, but you are also well engaged with team facilities. What is the thing maybe on the outside looking in that we're not aware of? Because I think a lot of people do question Drew's mental state when it comes to the highest level of college football. Where do you hear pick up growth in that regard compared to maybe the 18, 19-year-old that you shared the field with a few years ago?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just being that leader, being that guy, the guy that guys look to on the squad when it goes a little south and he can pick them up. Because I'll tell you, Sean Clifford was one hell of a leader and he was emotional. And I think that's not even just the fan base, but I can tell you the players for sure. When he trucked dude at West Virginia and stiff armed him and got in his face. And there was a couple times where Drew really showed some emotion at Wisconsin where he turned around and mouthed something that we saw on the broadcast, all that type of stuff. Anytime we saw fire out of Drew, it got people really excited because, like you said, when he first came in, yeah, he was that quiet guy. I'll never forget his first day in there when obviously came in with the second team and we're given the cadence and Cliff gives it and then Drew comes up and it was like you could barely hear him. And it was like, all right, got a little work to do to this 18-year-old kid. And he has come a really long way. And I know he has worked so hard to improve upon that and earn that trust and respect of his teammates. And he's done that. Now I think he really needs to take that to the next level. Be that fiery guy. Be the guy that the teammates can emotionally rely on. Because like I said, I can tell you that 2022 season where we went to the Rose Bowl, it was special from a standpoint of what we knew we had in Cliff. I mean, he would fire guys up in the locker room, jacking dudes up, just we had PJ, we had Jair Brown too. That was a special team from a leadership standpoint, and we can kind of get into that conversation too. I think we have great leadership this year with older guys, Dawkins, DeLuca, and then obviously Drew. But that means a lot to an offense when the leader, because the quarterback is always the leader, when he is that dude, when he is the guy that brings the energy. And like I said, I think that's something that earlier on Drew struggled a little bit with, and now he has gotten so much better. But like I said, you just see what it injects to the sideline. If you watch Drew, put a move on someone, stiff arm someone, they get so hype. And that really just kind of goes throughout the entire team and is so just infectious when your leader does that, when your guy does that. So I think that's his next step, is being the emotional leader, not only of the offense, but really of the entire team.
Landon, you've waited long enough. Let's talk about some offensive linemen because this team has one of the most impressive units in the country. And that's a statement that I didn't think many of us figured we'd be making about Penn State a few years ago. You talked about some of those ground game struggles back in 2020, your first year in 2021. They are a thing of the past. This is a team that led the Big Ten in rushing last season. They've also become really strong at not allowing sacks back-to-back years inside the top 20 in permitting sacks. I think they were pretty far down that list 5 years ago. And so, Landon, when you think about the fact that the national perception on Penn State is a lot about they've got this experienced offensive line, they've got this depth in the offensive line, they've got these two running backs, got to make you feel proud, but it also kind of flips the script a little bit in terms of Penn State's national perception because they are a force to be reckoned with in the trenches and with those two running backs following the lead.
Feels good to say we have a great offensive line, Tyler. That is for sure. I was reminiscing on that with Nick Dawkins the other day of being like, yo, look what we helped build up to this point. I mean, it's cool to see because I remember even when I got here in 21, it was not in a good place. And the offensive line room as a whole, just the leadership wasn't good, and it wasn't somewhere that we necessarily love to be. Now it is completely different. I mean, Coach Trout, I actually had him on the podcast. I'm releasing that here in a week or two. I mean, every Monday in the summer, he blocks off 5 different tee times at Mountain View. All the guys on the O-line go golf. Tuesday night, Coach Earls is our strength coach for the offensive line. Each position group has a strength coach. I mean, we love that man like no other. And a bunch of the guys on the O-line go out to his kids' flag football games and just go cheer him on. I mean, the guys constantly grubbing together. We're always hitting up Texas Roadhouse, probably the favorite of the offensive line, but making our way around town, doing that type of stuff. I mean, it means so much to what this group is. And there's a reason why the depth is there so much. The guys it's just such a tight knit group, and it's just fun to watch and just see that kind of all come together. A lot of guys deserve credit. Juice Scruggs, Olu Fashanu, of just kind of being the pioneers of that group. But coming into this year, to be able to rely on this ground game, and obviously they're going to be great in pass protection, but be able to run the ball the way I think we're going to be able to run the ball. And you got a glimpse of it last year when you saw against Oregon, which coming into that game, I was worried. I was telling fans, I'm like, yo, I don't know if we're going to break 100 yards type thing. I mean, Derek Harmon obviously went first round of the Steelers. They had two great defensive ends. It was one of the better front sevens I've seen in a little bit. I thought they were the best in football last year. My God, did we take it to them, Tyler? I mean, 300 yards on the ground. Nick Dawkins took Derek Harmon to the woodshed, first round draft pick. I mean, it was fun to watch. Obviously, Notre Dame, it felt like we could run the ball at will. Nolan Rucci really came on at the end of last year. The one thing that I'm really excited to see is I think there's a little bit of competition, say at right guard. I think a lot of people think it might be at right tackle. Where we sit, Nolan Rucci is a class of 2021. He was my class. We did not get a COVID year. The last guys to get COVID year are 2020. So that's Nick Dawkins and Zariah Fisher and then Trevor Pena. Those are the last guys to be able to use COVID year. So this is Nolan Rucci's last year no matter what. I think he's probably played his way into being the starting right tackle. So Anthony Donka coming off of an injury at Minnesota, I think, and he started at guard to start his career. He was actually he was like the third string left guard. I remember when I had 23 in that camp when we first started, and then ended up playing about half of the Ole Miss Peach Bowl when Caden Wallace only played half of the game. Anthony Donka came in, did a great job. So Coach Troutwine has mentioned the possibility of Anthony Donka getting guard reps. The more and more you really start to examine it, I think there's a world where Cooper Cousins and Anthony Donka are coming into this fall camp in a battle for that right guard spot. I would lean towards Anthony Donka in that situation. I know everybody's really excited about Cooper Cousins, and I think Cooper is going to be a fantastic player, and I think he's going to be that next Nick Dawkins of being what we call the mayor of State College. I think he's already well on his way if you've been following Penn State on social media, doing great things to represent the community. But I just think Cooper Cousins is a great mauler in the run game. A little bit of a leaning issue in pass pro, and I know Coach Troutwine works on that tenfold. That's one of the biggest things he works on is staying in your legs and not getting out and leaning and giving that defensive lineman the ability to kind of push, pull you, or swipe you. I think Anthony Donka is a little bit more polished. And if you remember back, Anthony Donka actually got hurt twice. It was in the UCLA game. It was very clear his shoulder came out of socket. He was holding it and had to run off, missed about 2 games, came back, and then I think he played like USC and Wisconsin, and then obviously finished the year getting hurt against Minnesota, and that was it for him. I mean, he was just decimating that right side of the offensive line on run blocks. And I think at one point, me and T. Frank had looked up the stats. It was like if we ran to the left, it was like 2.5 yards per carry. And when we ran behind Anthony Donka, it was like 8.5 yards per carry in those like first 5 or 6 games. So saying all to say, can you fathom a combo block between Anthony Donka, 6'5", 6'6", 325, and Nolan Rucci, 6'8", 330? Don't want to be that defensive tackle, Tyler. I'll tell you that much. And then looking obviously on the other side, Drew Shelton, criminally underrated. I mean, just not talked about a lot, which generally is good for offensive linemen, but I feel like he deserves a little bit more credit than what he got for what he did last year. I mean, he was locked down at left tackle against some really good defensive ends. Vanga Ioane is getting All-American attention. I think him getting put in motion a lot and that him just absolutely destroying 98 from UCLA kind of upped his stock and got people excited about Vanga. But, I mean, an absolute mauler in the run game. And not to bring up I keep bringing up bad games, man, but Ohio State this year, we put him in motion 4 times on that goal line. We kept putting Vanga. I know everybody loves the play, but I'm just saying I hope we don't do that this year. I'm actually working on a film breakdown about that. I'll give a little bit of a spoiler alert. We averaged about like 2.5 yards per play when we put Vanga in motion from wide receiver. We did it like 15 times last year. So I know it's probably a fan favorite, but I hope we don't do that on the goal line this year and take away like our best run blocker. But it's just so good up front. And then obviously you got Nick Dawkins calling all the calls you need, being that veteran leadership, talk about emotional leader. That is Nick Dawkins through and through. And he is the heart and soul of this entire Penn State football roster, but especially that offensive line. And then just looking down the line, you got great depth. You got a ton of guys that you can play. And let's just say Cooper Cousins doesn't start at right guard and he's that sixth guy. You got great depth moving around guys. If someone gets hurt at tackle, okay, let's plug Cooper in and Anthony Donka can go play either tackle. So you got that, and that's something you look around college football. If you got to play 16 games, I mean, knock on wood, I mean, injuries happen. Notre Dame and Ohio State both had like 2 starting offensive linemen by the time they got to the Natty. So we're going to need some depth, and we have that. Philip Troutwine has built that, and I think offensive line, it's going to the season's going to run through them, really.
Well, I do look forward to hearing your interview on Landon Tengwall's college football show with Phil Troutwine. It's pretty cool. A guy who was involved with raising you as a young pup on campus, and now you get a chance to kind of pick his brain on your podcast. Very cool. But I do want to get into the fact that depth, because you can list the headliners of this group. But when I paid a visit to the offensive line room last month and spent some time with Phil, he was talking about the Joe Moore Award and it being attainable, the number one offensive line trophy in America. He truly thinks they have a chance to get it, but it wasn't really about those top 5 or 6 guys. It was about the depth. He says he thinks he can use 11 players by design in the season opener. He said, you get in a matchup against an Oregon, maybe it's more like 8 or 9, but still, Landon, whether it's a Cooper Cousins and Anthony Donko or Nolan Rucci left out of that initial 5-man group, it's a hell of a lineman watching you play the first snap of the game. Factor in Javen Williams, who got almost all the work as the primary right tackle this spring with Rucci and Donko unavailable, a former 5-star who has experience at guard as well. And then TJ Shanahan, a guy who started 5 games in the SEC last year for Texas A&M, someone that Phil Troutwine knows really well through his former offensive line coach Steve Adazio, his mentor. And so there's 8, 9 names right there before we get into some of the younger pieces. So put me in a position of being a TJ Shanahan or a Javen Williams, where you may have starting pedigree on many campuses across college football and within your own conference. But right now, because of where it is, you might have to watch half of the offensive snaps this year. You got to wait for Phil Troutwine to tap on your helmet. How does Phil play that juggling act and keeping everyone motivated and hungry and not getting down on themselves when you can't get everybody 50 snaps a game?
Yeah, obviously setting realistic expectations, just communicating with the guys. I do think he does a great job of it. I mean, you look at Cooper Cousins, who even last year was kind of that 6th, 7th man. I'd say JB Nelson was more of the 6th man, but Cooper Cousins played in every single game last year. So I think he can find ways. And like you said, maybe against Ohio State and Oregon, probably won't see as much of that rotation. But even when you're playing, in Iowa or you're playing at UCLA and it's been a long week before that, and you need to get some of these hits off of these guys, you feel confident. And so, I mean, being a player in that situation, obviously it's not the best. And if there is any scenario, let's just say maybe there's a rotation at right guard or even right tackle, and maybe Anthony Donka and Nolan Rucci do rotate, or we're rotating Cooper Cousins and Anthony Donka at right guard. I will say, not the biggest fan of that, having done that exact thing with Hunter Norzad in 2022. It is hard to get a rhythm. So it's something that I'm okay with doing. Like I said, especially in those games where you feel confident, we're like, hey, we're not losing this game. But if we are in a tight battle with Ohio State, I can't really say that I want to see TJ Shanahan coming in, at center for Nick Dawkins or at guard or same thing. Just that plugging and playing, just kind of moving guys around. I think it's completely fine, like I said, to get guys reps. And that's the biggest thing, is something that the sports science people are studying is, hey, if we're able to take off 50 reps off this guy, instead of having 700 snaps, he has, even 620 snaps in a season. That lessens the chance of injury. So I think throughout the year, in those lesser games against FIU, if we're in the second quarter and we're already up by 24 points, well, yeah, I really hope that even if it's early in the game, you don't normally take the starters out until at least halftime. But yeah, let's start plugging some guys in. Let's start moving this around a little bit. Even same thing against a Big Ten team where, hey, maybe we're only up 10 or 13 points, but we're probably going to win this game. Yeah, let's throw a couple of those guys in there. Let's check out, Egan Boyer, that type of situation. So, but I would say, I want to put that out there, that the rotational switching drives, it's not fun, Tyler. I don't think that would be the best, but I know Coach Troutwine's going to do a great job of getting these guys in, because that's the biggest thing, is truly building that depth. Not only having guys that, I feel like they could play, but hey, whoever goes down. I mean, look back to like Drew Shelton freshman year when Olu Fashanu went down in 2022 against Ohio State. He was done for the year. Freshman Drew Shelton came in and got to play a ton and did really, really well. And that's because he prepared that way, got some snaps earlier in the season. So that's part of it too, is I'm investing in TJ Shanahan and Boyer and Javen Williams because I might need them. Like I said, God forbid an injury happens and they got to play. Well, oh, great. You already played in 5 games this year. It might not have been a ton, but you have confidence that I played. If you're completely dry and you haven't played at all, well, then there's like, crap, can I actually do this? Can I get out there and play right now? Oh no, I already played in 5 games. I'm feeling good. I'm confident. I know what it's like. I'm used to Drew's cadence, all of that type of stuff. So I just think just getting some of those game reps is really valuable for down the road too.
What I think is pretty telling to me, Landon, when you came to campus as a top 100 prospect in 2021, we're on this podcast being like, how quickly can you get Landon Tengwall involved? Can he be an answer? Can he be a solution? You need solutions. How fast can you get him ready? He's got to play now. Now they just brought in a top 30 guy and Malachi Goodman, a 5-star, and no one's talking about him because he's like the 3rd or 4th guy on that list at tackle. It's a different conversation. It's a different room. And I just think that's how I wanted to end this, because people were viewing you as a necessary savior, as a true freshman. And now it's like, no, Malachi Goodman, let's get him some time, put him with Chuck Losey. Let's see what he looks like next year. It's a very different frame of mind around this offensive line right now. What does it mean, though, for Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen? Because last we saw them, they were playing the best ball of their careers. There was points last year where we openly wondered on this podcast, had we seen the peak of Nick Singleton in a Penn State uniform? Had we seen the peak of Kaytron Allen in a Penn State uniform? Obviously, they flipped the script on us. It got healthy. The postseason was a dominant performance by that duo. And then, remarkably, they're both here as seniors. So what's the forecast for those two, in your opinion, given everything we just discussed that's going on around them on the offense, especially up front?
Number 1 and number 2 all time. That's it right there. I wouldn't go as far to say they're the greatest running backs ever. I think Saquon has to clearly take that title. But I mean, that's going to be exciting to kind of watch that happen. Of Nick Singleton sits at number 10 on the all-time rushing list. Kaytron Allen's number 11. I believe Nick Singleton needs 1,022. Kaytron needs 1,055. So that the kind of tracking that's going to be fun. I'm actually doing something at the student bookstore where we ordered magnets, because I don't know if you've ever been in the student bookstore, but they have the all-time tackle list on the right, all-time rushing list on the left. And we're going to do kind of a campaign where we move the guys up the steps each week. So excited for that and excited for them this year. Look, they came back to win a national championship. And that is why I think everybody's so excited for this year. We knew that when we got that core group of guys back, obviously Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter were no matter what out of here. But those guys that really could have left but decided not to because they wanted to do one more go around. And I think they knew how special this team could be. And that starts with the run game. That starts, I mean, if we're able to rely on them in the big games, and it is kind of, you can't stop us, mentioned, Michigan 2023 style. And, we still have a Heisman level quarterback and a really good passing game, but we don't have to rely on them. And we know we are going at least 5 yards a pop on you. Well, it's going to feel really, really good. I'm excited to see these two guys go. I know they have a chip on their shoulder from last year. I think Nick Singleton was obviously playing great football, but I mean, Kaytron Allen was playing out of this world by the end of last year. He was running like a man possessed, and it was
Landon, let's be honest. I mean, he looked like a completely different back from September, October, Kaytron Allen, didn't he? It didn't look like the same guy.
Completely different. I mean, he was getting in the open field, and that's one of my favorite things, honestly, is Kaytron Allen in the open field gets exciting because you don't know what movie he's going to put on. He might also just absolutely decapitate you and truck you, and then just kick your door in the end zone, and yell an expletive on TV there. But I would say the one thing that I want to see is Nick Singleton in the open field. I think that is the one big improvement, if I just had to say as a whole for them. I think Nick Singleton's going to see even more reps in the receiving game, which I'm excited for. He was really good there. That's something that took a huge step up last year, and I thought it really elevated the offense. Nick Singleton, when he gets in that open field, can he cement himself as a true home run hitter? Because I feel like sometimes he gets one-on-one and just doesn't really know how to attack that guy exactly. He doesn't take the best angle and kind of just almost will give himself up or just kind of put his shoulder down into it. Now it's time, and Coach Franklin talked about this of being the next step for him. Stan Drayton needs to be working on him. Hey, let's put a move on, whether that's a hurdle, that's a spin, that's something that Saquon Barkley was just stupid at, just being able to put a move on someone and get past them, the double shimmy shake, and then whatever it was after that. Can Nick Singleton get to that level? I think if he can get even more dangerous in the open field, the sky is the limit for this offense, and especially this rushing attack that I think will be the best in all of college football.
If he can do more improvising, it's going to be very dangerous for him and for this team. And he talked about, he's been sweating more than ever on the practice field working with Stan Drayton. And he has mentioned that open field reactionary opportunity is something that he wants to capitalize more in this coming year. Landon, great stuff so far. I do want to get over to the defensive line because you had it on your list of topics here that we should get into. So much familiarity, experience to go over the offensive line. Defensively, though, you lose 3 of your top 4 defensive ends, including an All-American in Abdul Carter, the number 3 overall pick in the draft. And then a defensive tackle, including Akeem Beamon, who was with this team deep into the season last year. You say goodbye to 3 of your primary 4 defensive tackles as well. You bring back I'm losing the name of Zane Durant. One of the best defensive tackles in America. Eluded my mind for a moment there. You bring back Zane Durant. They're high on Xavier Gilliam at defensive tackle, but it feels right now, Landon, when you're talking defensive line, you're talking names, not really proven commodities. So where are you wrapping your head around what Deion Barnes is trying to accomplish in the next month and a half?
Yeah, I think it's hard because you just went from, I think, the defensive line being probably the deepest room on the entire team last year at defensive tackle. It was just an embarrassment of riches, especially how they played towards the end of the year. Keziah Izzard came on big time, Alonzo Ford, and then obviously defensive end, you had Smith Vilbert and Amin Vanover as backups. I mean, it was great. You come into this year, and as you said, it is a little scarce, especially after Max Granville goes down with what we think is probably going to take him out for the entire season. He looked like an absolute animal. I mean, he was ready for this year. So that one really hurts. Also, talking about this year, for the past couple years, we have had Batman and Robin at defensive end. We have had Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, and then you had Abdul Carter, Deni Dennis Sutton. Now it's Deni's time, but who is his Robin is kind of the question there. And I thought that very well could be Max Granville. Zariah Fisher has to step up. No ands, ifs, buts, none about it. He has to be the dude this year to really complement Deni Dennis Sutton, because without that, it starts to look, at defensive end. I mean, there's Anai White. You obviously got Jalen Harvey, who is actually Chop Robinson's cousin. So hopefully that kind of trickles down the bloodline a little bit there.
Here's what it is, Landon. Here's what it is. You're relying on guys who at this point have proven pretty much nothing at the power conference level, and that includes Anai White, who spent 3 years at Texas A&M. And that is scary because you're putting a lot of eggs in the basket of Zariah Fisher, who didn't get a single game rep last year. So you're right. It is you're walking on eggshells a bit, and you're maybe one more injury away from really wondering what happens.
That's the biggest thing for me. I mean, you can look at Alonzo Ford. We've gotten answers on kind of on Tony Rojas, on Rappleyea, on Anthony Donka, Franklin said they're all going to be healthy. I don't think we've got an official word on Alonzo Ford.
We got it last month. Ford is good to go for preseason.
Oh, fully good to go. Okay, appreciate that. Well, thank you. That's good to know. All right. I mean, if Alonzo Ford can get back to how he was playing before he got injured at Minnesota, I feel pretty good about this defensive line. Once again, knock on wood. If this defensive line suffers even one injury, we are in a really bad place. That's kind of where we're at. We cannot afford any more injuries on the defensive line. But on the surface level, if Zariah Fisher can get back to, and I played against him a lot. I went against him a ton in practice when I was playing tackle early on in my career. Has a lethal inside move. I'd say he's not a Chop Robinson or Abdul Carter in terms of the get off. He's not going to just beat you around the edge and just be like, how did he get off like that? But he is a seasoned pass rusher in the sense of he really likes to get hands on and kind of feel your weight of where you're going and then work his move. So he was always really, really good at that. After 2 season-ending injuries in 2022 and then obviously this past year, can he make it all work in 2025? I mean, we need him to. There's really, outside of that, like you said, a lot of question marks and unproven talent. But I think if Alonzo Ford can play how he was playing, him and Zane Durant in the middle, I feel really good about that. Xavier Gilliam looks really big, as you'd say. Owen Wafel looks
Mhm.
In the run game, pretty solid, honestly. I know there's a little bit of sour taste there from his brother, but he looks stout. I've liked what I've seen from him when I watched a couple spring practices. So worried a little bit would be, I guess, a good term to describe it. But on that front group, that first group, that starting D line, it's a very talented group. There is just very little depth and really no one proven behind them, Tyler.
Yeah. Deion Barnes has done some really good things early on in his career as defensive line coach. This is going to be such a big year from a developmental standpoint about where he is in that room leading it. I think he's got 8 guys with freshman eligibility, including those red shirts. So a lot to work through. And let's look big picture on this defense because it's under new leadership with Jim Knowles making the splashy move from Ohio State and Pat Kraft and James Franklin getting that done. That's settled in. Now we want to see how this defense actually handles itself against the 12 offenses and then beyond. When it comes to this conversation, folks in Columbus have said, hey, just be aware, it could take some time, this transition. Penn State's not in a taking time kind of mode right now. They are in a win now mode. So when you look at Jim Knowles and when you kind of pick up on feedback that you've heard and maybe seen about the transition to his defense from Tom Allen, what stands out to you in terms of ceiling and maybe the next step for this defense? And where do you look and say, beyond the defensive line, I just don't know if I see it quite yet?
Yeah, so with Jim Knowles, that, like you said, that had been the talk of the town. It takes 3 years to get acclimated to his defense. I had a couple guys, even from my high school, that I reached out to that played, especially even on the defensive line there at Ohio State. They told me they didn't feel that was really true. Obviously, defensive line is probably the easiest position, I think, in total. But they told me they felt like it was just their defense wasn't as good when Jim Knowles first got there as to where it was this past year. Jim Knowles got really creative with a lot of his blitzes at Ohio State. I think, you want to be somewhat careful to limit that as far as asking your defense to do too much or asking one guy to do too many things. I think you have a really talented group here. I think he's going to be, really excited with what he's going to be able to do with Zakee Wheatley. Zakee Wheatley is just a straight up ball hawk. He's been that way since I played him in high school. Wherever you put him, he is going to find the football. One guy I'm excited about, King Mack, getting him back from Alabama. He was here, went to Alabama, decided to come back. Not as great in coverage, but that heat-seeking missile that you can put near the line of scrimmage, and he will go stamp somebody. He's a really good tackler. So I think getting that was a big get. For me, Tony Rojas. I mean, all eyes on Tony Rojas to be that sideline-to-sideline guy that we can count on to just be a dude on defense. And I've been watching a ton of tape on Tony, and I've been able to accumulate at least 10 plays where he wasn't able to use his right arm, Tyler.
Yeah.
It was that clear. He was wearing the brace week 1 in West Virginia. So to me, probably happened in spring camp last year. He hurt his shoulder, and I played with that. It is hard, but I can't imagine having to tackle with one arm. And so not only, and then you might ask, his other pieces of his game weren't as good. Well, when you feel like you can't tackle and you can't play to your highest ability, you start to lose a lot of confidence in yourself. And it's not as easy to go make those plays and have that, I'm that dude mindset when you're getting tackles broke on you left and right. One other thing I will say, I don't use, PFF as God sent, but it is, he had like a 90% coverage rate. Tony Ross was like borderline elite in coverage last year. If he can continue that over and then improve his tackling, which he had about a 22% missed tackle rate, which is not very good. A good linebacker, Kobe King, was around 10%. That's also where Amari Campbell was. So Amari Campbell coming in already, I think, the best tackler in this linebacker room. But you pair Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas together, and you feel confident. They're actually both friends from where they grew up. I'm feeling a little bit better about this linebacker core than I did looking at it in February when I said, I think this is, maybe the biggest question mark on this defense. And it very well still might be, but I think there is the ability there for this group to actually be pretty solid. And we know what we got out of Dom DeLuca, obviously veteran guy, another one of those leaders, going to be one of the very few 3-time captains of a James Franklin squad. He's always going to find a way to get a couple turnovers. I'm not as pessimistic on this linebacking core as I was before. And I just think, like I said, the main thing is can Tony Rojas be that superstar? I think we know Denai Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant are going to be those superstars up front, but can we have that in the intermediate part of our defense and be that dude. Get a couple of those turnovers. If you remember his interception against Bowling Green, that wasn't talked about a lot, but that was a big moment there where he picked us off. And then Zakee Wheatley had one too, and it kind of turned the tide a little bit of getting not losing to Bowling Green, which would have been really, really bad for us. So can he have more of those big splash plays and kind of almost replace that Abdul Carter, where Abdul Carter was chasing dudes sideline to sideline? Because I think Tony Rojas is really the only dude on this defense that has that type of speed and that closing speed. Because to me, there's a difference between like flatline speed and when it felt like Abdul Carter would like teleport into the flats. Can we get that out of Tony Rojas as well? And then Tyler, also the DBs, which I think is the strength of this defense. AJ Harris, I mean, what a get for us from Georgia a couple years ago. And that is what happens when you get to kind of stash away 5 stars. And, Georgia's just throwing, 5-star back in the portal, go back. I'm like, can we have some? And this is what happens when Terry Smith gets his hands on a 5-star cornerback like that. So I think, he's getting mock draft, maybe even the first round, which I don't think we've ever had, maybe.
No defensive back, ever.
Yeah. Ever. Good grief. Okay.
Joey Porter, number 32 overall, but that year was first pick of the second round. So.
That's right. Oh, man, so close. So I think AJ Harris could be that. Davian Collins, I am hearing scouts are incredibly excited. I've been talking to some people. They're talking 4.2, sub 4.3 speed. So that is a fast cornerback. I'd love to see that. Like I said, it feels like those two guys are guys maybe we don't normally get. Like Penn State doesn't normally get a 4.2 cornerback that's good, or AJ Harris that's just locked down and just dominates guys. That's going to be great. And then obviously, like I said, talked about Zakee Wheatley and King Mack. Think that is going to be a great duo at safety. And then you got young Dejon Lane coming into year 2. Was forced to play some, I think a little too early his freshman year, but coming along, I know they're really excited about him, especially Dex, as Poindexter has been working with him very closely. So.
Speaking to that defensive secondary, Elliot Washington is getting a ton of praise, and he's a guy that none of us are really quick to go to him because there's a lot of names, but yeah, he could be one of those high charging cornerbacks from that group. And I'll throw one more name in that linebacker conversation because I'm with you. I think Tony Rojas has the biggest ability as an individual to elevate the entire defense this season. But I think Anthony Specca, as a redshirt freshman, could really do a lot of things to maybe stabilize the linebacker situation in terms of feeling a little bit better about depth, feeling a little bit better about mixing and matching in the box if you need to for Jim Knowles. And so we'll learn a lot about this defense in the months ahead. And offensively, Landon, you already laid it out earlier on this show, but I want you to go either side of the ball here to finish off our conversation. Give me a few names, maybe names that you already brought up, that you just don't feel like are getting enough press, spotlight, conversation around them as Penn State prepares for preseason camp.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on Anthony Specca real quick. I saw a photo, not to get weird online 24/7, but I saw a photo where it was Dom DeLuca, Specca, and Tony Rojas, and they were like flexing with their shirts off. Specca is huge right now. He is, oh my God, he looks like old school linebacker that wants to just put you in the dirt. I'm excited about Specca. For me, I will go couple guys. I don't know who's going to be running back 3. I liked Cam Wallace. Obviously suffered a really bad injury against Kent State last year. Cam Wallace, I was hearing a lot of good things out of especially the offensive line. They loved him. And so coming off of an injury, can he get back? Quentin Martin Jr. is probably the most versatile in that room. Can almost, was almost like a slot guy there. Think about moving him out there maybe. I think Koto Nicki could have fun with that, where someone he can really move around, end arounds, bring him in motion, that type of stuff. I like Corey Smith a lot. I think Corey Smith is one of the most shifty running backs we've had in a long time. Saw his long run against Washington. I throw all 3 of those names out there. I don't feel necessarily a lot better about one than the other, but I say RB3, Tyler, because running back 3 is going to have such a bigger role in the 2025 offense than it had in the 2024 offense, because all those extra carries after Nick and Katron went to the Bo Prabula package or went to the Tyler Warren package. Well, now we don't have that. Now running back 3 is like an actual real position in the Penn State offense. So I like all 3 of them. I think whoever comes out on top and is that running back 3 is going to see a lot of carries. And then in turn, probably running back 1, barring, you can talk about Messiah Mickens maybe could come in and be that freshman guy, but probably would be RB1 going into 2026. So I think running back 3 is someone to really look at this year. And I think that's a camp battle to definitely keep an eye on and talk about. Outside of that, Zion Tracy on defense for me. Probably going to start at that nickel cornerback position, which is where Jalen Reed played a lot of that. We call it the lion position here, where they're able to play near the line of scrimmage and roam around. Zion Tracy did play some of it towards the end of last year. I really like what he brings to the table. Fast. We remembered his pick 6 against Ohio State. That was a fantastic play. My biggest thing is, can he kind of replicate what Jalen Reed, when Jalen Reed popped down there? Jalen Reed was borderline elite as a pass rusher. I think that's something he didn't get enough credit for. It felt like anytime we were bringing Jalen Reed on a blitz, he was shaking that offensive tackle or that running back that was trying to block him, and he would either get home or cause a lot of pressure. So how does Jim Knowles scheme that up? How does he get Zion Tracy back there? And really just kind of as a whole, I know we're talking specific players, so I'm excited for him. But how does Jim Knowles, how does he go about these blitzes? Is he going to send a lot of blitzes? Is it more going to be 5, maybe 6-man blitzes and not, all out blitzes we call cover 0, where you basically send everybody? When you have great DBs, you are able to, send more blitzes and trust guys to play one-on-one. So that's something I'm excited to see. But yeah, how does he move Zion Tracy around coming into a really, really big year for Zion Tracy?
And that's not foreign to this defense. I think there was back-to-back years where Johnny Dixon led all cornerbacks across the country in sacks, playing with a different coordinator, of course. But I'm going to circle back to RB3 because you're right. It might also be the RB1 conversation next spring. But just keep an eye on Tyke Hayes. I know you're already well aware of him, but he's a guy that I've heard some really interesting things about through half a year on campus. So there's 5 guys behind Singleton and Allen trying to make their case and all that. And I think that's a great point that you bring up, because that could be a really huge one, not just this year, but moving forward for personnel reasons. Landon, we got a full hour here. There's obviously a lot more we could discuss when it comes to Penn State, but folks can check out you and all of your conversations over at Landon Tengwall's College Football Show. You can subscribe over at YouTube. And I know you've got a lot of things, as you said earlier, cooking for this season. You're going to be hopping on with other people, doing a lot of collaborative efforts. We hope to get you back on here to talk about Penn State during the season as well. But as I always say to you, I'm proud of you. I'm excited for you. And glad we can get this conversation. And coming off of vacation, this is kind of the conversation I needed. Get my mind right, get locked in a little bit, and start to wrap our heads around these 2025 Nittany Lions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it.
All right, good stuff. Landon Tengwall, former Penn State Nittany Lion and a former top 100 recruit. Always good to have you on. We'll talk to you again soon.
Talk soon. Thanks.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast. As I promised earlier in the show, we will have a full coverage report from Las Vegas at Big Ten Media Days. Daniel Gallen, Mark Brennan will join me right here on the Lions 24/7 podcast for our second episode this week. You can check all of our coverage from Las Vegas over at lions247.com. In the meantime, James Franklin, 3 Penn State players, including Drew Allar, are set to speak with media on Wednesday. For now, stepping aside, big thanks again to Landon Tengwall and to our audience, whether you're watching or listening to this show. We appreciate it. I'm Tyler Donahue. We'll tune in. We'll talk to you soon, and we thank you for tuning in to the Lions 24/7 podcast.